good evening, or maybe it's morning where you are. But wherever you are, I want you to pause for a second and really feel this moment. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to keep asking, keep hoping, keep waiting for money to show up? That quiet desperation, that subtle feeling of lack, it drains you more than you realize. I used to live in that space, constantly pleading, constantly chasing, as if something outside me held the power. And the more I begged, the further everything seemed to move away from me. That's when something inside me shifted, and everything changed. I realized that begging is a confession of not having. Every time you ask with desperation, you are affirming absence, not presence. Think about it. When you beg, you're saying, I don't have this, and I don't believe I can have it unless something external gives it to me. That energy is powerful, but not in the way you want. It keeps you stuck in a loop where wanting becomes your identity. And as long as you identify with wanting, you cannot step into having. That was the truth I had to face. So I stopped asking the universe for money like I was separate from it. I stopped looking up, waiting, hoping, wishing. Instead, I turned inward and asked myself a different question. What would it feel like if I already had it? Not tomorrow, not someday, but right now. I allowed myself to experience the feeling of financial freedom, security, ease, and abundance. I didn't wait for proof. I became the proof within. And that single shift changed the game completely. You see, your reality is not responding to your words, it's responding to your state of being. You can say, I want money 1,000 times, but if your inner state is lack, fear, and doubt, that's what gets reflected back to you. But when you move into the feeling of already having, something powerful happens. Your mind stops searching, your energy stops chasing, and instead you start attracting. Opportunities feel natural, ideas flow effortlessly, and doors open in ways you didn't expect. It feels almost unreal, but it's not magic, it's alignment. Let me ask you something honestly. How do you act when you already have enough money? You don't panic, you don't obsess, you don't feel desperate. There's a calmness, a certainty, a quiet confidence. That's the state you must embody, not fake, but genuinely feel. Because your outer world is nothing but a mirror of your inner assumptions. Change the assumption, and the reflection has no choice but to follow. That's the law working in your favor. At first, it might feel strange. Your mind will try to pull you back, reminding you of bills, responsibilities, and limitations. But understand this, those are just old echoes of a past state. They are not your future unless you keep giving them power. Stay loyal to your new feeling, even when there's no evidence. Because the moment you demand evidence, you step back into lack. Faith is not believing after you see, it's knowing before anything appears. I stopped begging and I started declaring, not with words, but with feeling. I walked differently. I thought differently. I carried myself as someone who already had what they desired. And slowly, without force, without struggle, things began to shift. Money came in unexpected ways. Ideas turned into income, and what once felt impossible became normal. Not because the world changed, but because I did. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. It's not about working harder, chasing more, or stressing yourself out. It's about becoming the version of you who naturally experiences abundance. Because when you become that person internally, the external world rearranges itself to match you. You don't chase money, money flows to the identity you hold. That's the difference. So today, I want you to stop for a moment and notice. Are you asking or are you being? Are you begging or are you embodying? Because those two states create completely different realities, and you cannot live in both at the same time. Choose one. Choose wisely. Because your life is not waiting on luck, timing, or permission. It's waiting on you to decide who you are. The moment you stop begging is the moment you take your power back. The moment you stop chasing is the moment things start coming to you. And the moment you truly feel that you already have it, that's when everything begins to change. Not slowly, not someday, but in ways that will surprise you. So don't wait for the world to confirm it. Be it first, feel it now, and watch how reality catches up. When you constantly find yourself asking, pleading, or silently wishing for money, there is a deeper message being sent from within you, one that often goes unnoticed. It is not just a request, it is an admission, a quiet but powerful declaration that says, I do not have enough. And no matter how softly or loudly you express it, that feeling becomes your dominant state. You might think you are doing something positive by asking, by hoping, by trying to attract. But if the emotion behind it is desperation, fear, or lack, then what you are really reinforcing is the absence of what you desire. This is where most people get stuck, not realizing that their effort to receive is actually keeping them from receiving. Think about the energy behind begging for a moment. It is not calm, it is not confident, and it is certainly not secure. It is restless, uneasy, and uncertain. It comes from a place that believes something is missing and that the power to fix it exists somewhere outside of you. When you operate from that space, you unknowingly place yourself in a position of separation from money, from abundance, and even from your own sense of control. You begin to see money as something distant, something difficult, something that must be chased or earned through struggle. And the more you repeat this pattern, the more natural it becomes, until it starts to define your entire relationship with wealth. Now pause and reflect. Have you ever noticed how the more you worry about money, the more problems seem to appear? It feels like a cycle you can't break. You think about bills, and more expenses come up. You stress about income, and opportunities feel limited. This is not coincidence. It is the result of continuously living in a state of lack. Your mind becomes trained to look for evidence that supports your belief, and your world begins to reflect it back to you. Not because the world is against you, but because it is responding to the signal you are consistently sending out. And that signal, when rooted in begging, is always one of not enough. There is also something else that happens when you keep begging. You give away your power. You start believing that something external must grant you permission to have what you want. Whether you call it luck, fate, timing, or even the universe, you place yourself in a position of waiting. Waiting for the right moment, waiting for a sign, waiting for something to change. But in that waiting, you remain exactly where you are. Because waiting is passive, and passivity is rooted in the belief that you are not in control. And as long as you feel out of control, you will continue to experience outcomes that reflect that helplessness. The truth is, abundance does not respond to desperation. It responds to alignment, and alignment cannot exist where there is constant longing. Longing is a state of, I don't have it yet, and as long as that remains your dominant feeling, that is what continues to be expressed in your reality. You cannot simultaneously feel that you lack money and expect to experience financial ease. The two are opposing states, and only one can dominate at a time. So if begging is your habit, lack becomes your identity, and your identity shapes everything you experience. It's important to understand that this doesn't mean you are doing something wrong intentionally. Most people are simply repeating patterns they've been conditioned to believe. They've been taught that wanting something means asking for it, chasing it, and working tirelessly until it appears. But what they are not taught is the importance of the inner state. They are not shown that the feeling behind the desire matters more than the action itself. So they continue to push, to strive, to beg, thinking that more effort will eventually lead to results, not realizing that the foundation they are building on is unstable. Imagine trying to fill a container that has a hole at the bottom. No matter how much you pour into it, it never stays full. That is exactly what happens when you try to attract money while feeling lack. The more you focus on getting, the more you emphasize that you don't already have it. And that contradiction prevents you from truly experiencing what you desire. Because the goal is not just to receive money, it is to feel secure, abundant, and free. And those feelings cannot exist in a state of begging. The shift begins when you become aware of this pattern. When you catch yourself thinking, I need money, or why don't I have enough? And instead of continuing that thought, you pause. you recognize that this is the old state speaking, the state of lack that has been repeated for so long. And in that moment of awareness, you have a choice. You can either continue reinforcing it, or you can start shifting into something new. That choice, though it may seem small, is incredibly powerful. Because every time you choose a different feeling, a different assumption, you begin to weaken the old pattern and strengthen a new one. Breaking the habit of begging is not about denying your current situation. It is about refusing to let it define you. It is about understanding that your circumstances are temporary reflections of past states, not permanent truths. And if they were created through repeated thoughts and feelings, then they can be changed in the same way. But the first step is to stop affirming lack through desperation, to stop identifying as someone who is constantly in need, and to start seeing yourself as someone who is capable of experiencing abundance, not someday, but as a state you can begin to feel even now. Because the moment you stop begging, something shifts inside you. There is a sense of relief, of calm, of quiet confidence that begins to replace the anxiety. You are no longer chasing, you are centering. You are no longer asking from a place of emptiness. You are beginning to connect with a sense of fullness. And while it may not immediately change everything outside, it changes something far more important within you. And that inner change is what eventually transforms your outer world. So the next time you feel the urge to beg, to plead, to ask from a place of desperation, pause, notice the feeling behind it, and remind yourself that what you are truly seeking is not money itself, but the feeling of having it. And that feeling is something you can begin to cultivate right now, because once you shift from begging to being, from lacking to embodying, you are no longer reinforcing absence. You are stepping into the presence of what you desire, and that is where real change begins. There is something deeper at play in your life than actions, words, or even circumstances. It is your state of being. This is the silent force shaping everything you experience, whether you are aware of it or not. You may say all the right things, repeat affirmations, set goals, and make plans. But if your inner state does not match what you desire, the results will always feel delayed or inconsistent. Because life does not respond to what you say you want, it responds to what you consistently feel to be true. And that feeling, that inner assumption, becomes the blueprint for your reality. Think about how often people say, "I want money," yet deep down they feel worried, insecure, or doubtful about it. On the surface there is desire, but underneath there is fear. And it is that deeper layer that carries the real power. Your mind and body are always operating from a certain emotional state, whether it's confidence, lack, stress, or ease. That state becomes your normal, your baseline. And from that baseline, your thoughts, decisions, and reactions naturally emerge. So if your state is rooted in scarcity, everything you do will unknowingly reflect that, even your efforts to succeed. This is why two people can take the same action and get completely different results. One may approach an opportunity with confidence, expecting success, while the other approaches it with doubt, expecting rejection. The action looks the same, but the state behind it is entirely different. And that difference is what shapes the outcome. Because when you operate from confidence, you communicate differently, you notice different possibilities, and you persist with a different mindset. But when you operate from fear, you hesitate, you overthink, and you often pull back before anything can fully develop. Your state of being also influences what you notice in the world around you. It acts like a filter, highlighting things that match your internal belief system. If you feel abundant, you begin to notice opportunities, ideas, and connections that support that feeling. But if you feel lack, your mind becomes trained to focus on problems, limitations, and obstacles. It's not that one person is luckier than the other, it's that they are tuned into different frequencies of experience, and that tuning comes from within, not from external conditions. One of the most powerful realizations you can have is that your state is not fixed. It is not something you are born with, or something that is permanently shaped by your past. It is something you can shift consciously and intentionally. But to do that, you must first become aware of it. You must begin to observe how you feel on a daily basis. Not just what you think, but what you emotionally identify with. Are you walking through life feeling supported, capable, and secure? Or are you carrying a constant sense of pressure, lack, and uncertainty? Because that underlying feeling is what is quietly creating your experience. It's easy to believe that your state is a reaction to your circumstances, that you feel stressed because of money problems, or insecure because of lack of opportunities. But what if it's the other way around? What if your consistent state is what has been shaping those circumstances all along? This is where true power begins to reveal itself. Because if your inner world is influencing your outer world, then changing your inner state is not just helpful, it is essential. It becomes the starting point of transformation, not the result of it. Imagine for a moment that you begin to feel as if everything is already working out for you. Not based on evidence, not because something has already changed, but simply because you choose to adopt that state. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. Your mind may resist it, trying to pull you back into old patterns of worry and doubt. But if you persist, if you continue to return to that feeling, it begins to settle. It becomes more natural, more stable. And as it does, something remarkable happens. You start to respond to life differently. Instead of reacting with fear, you respond with clarity. Instead of seeing obstacles, you start seeing possibilities. Instead of feeling stuck, you begin to feel movement. And those subtle shifts in perception lead to different actions, different decisions, and ultimately different outcomes. But it all begins with the state you choose to embody. Not occasionally, not just when it's easy, but consistently, even when your external world has not yet caught up. This is why trying to change your life without changing your state often leads to frustration. You may work harder, try new strategies, or seek external solutions. But if your inner identity remains the same, the results will eventually reflect that. It's like trying to grow a new plant in the same old soil without changing its condition. The environment must support the growth. And in your life, that environment is your state of being. You are not just experiencing life, you are participating in its creation through your inner world. Every assumption you hold, every feeling you return to, every belief you reinforce is shaping the direction your life takes. This is not about controlling every detail or forcing outcomes. It is about aligning yourself with the version of reality you want to experience. And that alignment begins within, long before anything becomes visible on the outside. So if you truly want to see change, start with your state. Pay attention to how you feel, not just when things are going well, but especially when they are not. Because those moments reveal your default patterns. And in those moments, you have the greatest opportunity to shift, to choose a new feeling, a new assumption, a new way of being. It may not feel natural at first, but with repetition, it becomes your new normal. And once your state changes, everything else begins to follow. Not because you forced it, not because you chased it, but because you became it. Your life reflects who you are being, not just what you are doing. So become the version of yourself who already lives the reality you desire. Feel it, embody it, return to it again and again. Because that is the state from which everything you want can finally take shape. There is a powerful difference between wishing for something and becoming the version of yourself who already has it. Most people spend their lives hoping, dreaming, and waiting, but very few actually step into the identity of the person they want to be. And that is where the real shift happens. Not when you get the money, but when you become the person for whom having money is natural. Because the outer result is always a reflection of the inner identity you carry. If you still see yourself as someone who struggles, doubts, or lacks, then even if money comes, it will feel temporary or unstable. Embodiment means you stop separating yourself from your desire. Instead of saying, I want to be financially free, you begin to feel, think, and act like someone who already is. This is not about pretending in a fake or forced way. It is about internally aligning yourself with that version of you. Ask yourself honestly, how would you feel if you already had financial security? There would be a sense of calm, a quiet confidence, a release from constant worry. That feeling is the key, Because once you access it within, you are no longer chasing it outside. The challenge is that your mind is used to identifying with your current reality. It keeps reminding you of your bank balance, your responsibilities, your past experiences. And because of that, it feels easier to stay the same than to step into something new. But embodiment requires you to go beyond what is visible. It asks you to trust an inner reality before it shows up in the outer world. That's where most people stop. They wait for proof before they believe. But real transformation happens when you believe first and let the proof follow. When you begin to embody abundance, your thoughts naturally start to shift. You don't obsess over lack. You don't constantly worry about how things will happen. Instead, your mind becomes more solution-oriented, more creative, more open. You start thinking from a place of, it's already working out for me, rather than, I hope something works. And that subtle change in thinking influences your behavior in ways you may not even notice at first. You speak differently, you carry yourself differently, and you respond to situations with a new level of certainty. Embodiment also changes how you make decisions. When you identify as someone who is abundant, you don't make choices from fear or desperation. You don't settle for less out of insecurity, and you don't avoid opportunities because of doubt. Instead, you act with a sense of self-trust. You choose what aligns with your higher identity, not what matches your old limitations. And over time, those decisions begin to build a completely different life experience, one that reflects your new state of being. It's important to understand that embodiment is not something you do once. It is something you practice consistently. There will be moments when your old thoughts try to return, when your external reality tries to pull you back into old patterns. But in those moments, you have a choice. You can either react based on your past identity, or you can respond as the person you are becoming. Each time you choose the latter, you strengthen that new identity, and slowly it begins to feel more natural than the old one ever did. One of the most effective ways to embody a new identity is through feeling. Not forced words, not empty repetition, but genuine emotional experience. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine your life exactly as you want it. Feel the relief of having enough money, the ease of not worrying, the freedom to choose. Let that feeling settle into your body as if it is happening right now. The more real it feels internally, the more it begins to shape your external world. Because your mind does not distinguish strongly between imagination and reality, it responds to the feeling. At first, it may feel like you are just imagining things. But don't underestimate the power of that inner experience. Every external reality begins as an internal assumption. What you repeatedly feel and accept as true eventually expresses itself outwardly. So when you consistently embody abundance, you are not just imagining, you are creating. You are setting the foundation for a different life, one that aligns with your new identity rather than your past conditioning. Another important part of embodiment is letting go of the need to constantly check for results. When you truly embody something, you don't question it every moment. You don't keep asking, is it here yet? Because that question itself comes from doubt. Instead, you carry a quiet knowing that it is already done, even if you cannot see it yet. That inner certainty allows you to stay grounded, patient, and consistent. And that consistency is what eventually brings everything into form. You will also notice that when you embody abundance, your relationship with money begins to change. It no longer feels like something you have to chase or control. Instead, it becomes something that flows, something that is part of your experience rather than something separate from you. You start to trust that there are always ways for things to work out, always opportunities available, even if you don't see them immediately. That trust reduces fear, and when fear reduces, clarity increases. Embodiment is not about becoming someone completely different. It is about revealing a version of you that already exists within. The confident, abundant, secure version of you is not outside your reach. It is simply a state you have not fully stepped into yet. And the moment you begin to embody it, even in small ways, you start to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Because you are no longer waiting for change, you are becoming it. So instead of asking when things will change, Shift your focus to who you are being right now. Are you thinking, feeling, and acting like someone who already has what you desire? Or are you still holding on to the identity of someone who is waiting for it? Because that identity is the key to everything. Change that, and everything else will follow. Not instantly, not magically, but naturally, as a reflection of who you have chosen to become. There will come moments when your external reality seems to contradict everything you are trying to believe. You may look at your current situation, your bank balance, your responsibilities, your challenges, and feel a wave of doubt rising within you. It can feel almost impossible to ignore what is right in front of you. But this is exactly where the real work begins. Because staying faithful to your new assumption is not about doing it when it's easy. It's about holding on to it even when nothing around you seems to support it. That is the test of your inner stability. Your current reality is not a final truth. It is simply a reflection of past thoughts, past beliefs, and past emotional states. In other words, it is old news. What you are seeing today is the result of what you consistently felt and assumed yesterday. So if you keep reacting to it as if it is permanent, you end up recreating the same cycle again and again. This is why reacting emotionally to lack only reinforces it. The moment you accept your current situation as fixed, you unknowingly give it power to continue. But when you begin to see it as temporary, as something that can change, your relationship with it starts to shift. Ignoring current reality does not mean denying it or pretending it doesn't exist. It means refusing to let it define your inner state. It means you can acknowledge what is happening without allowing it to control how you feel about yourself or your future. You can say, "This is what I see right now, but this is not where I'm staying." That subtle shift in perspective creates space between you and your circumstances. It reminds you that you are not your situation. You are the one who can influence it. One of the biggest challenges people face is the need for immediate evidence. They want to feel secure only after something changes externally. But that approach keeps them stuck because it places their power outside of themselves. When you rely on external proof to feel confident, you become dependent on circumstances. And circumstances are always changing. True stability comes from within, from the ability to hold a belief even when there is no visible confirmation yet. That is what creates lasting change. Think of it like planting a seed. The moment you plant it, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You trust the process. You water it, you give it time, and you allow it to develop beneath the surface. Your inner assumptions work the same way. The moment you choose a new belief about yourself and your life, something begins to shift internally, but it may not be visible immediately. If you keep doubting it, questioning it, or abandoning it because you don't see results, you interrupt the process. But if you stay consistent, if you keep returning to that belief, it begins to take root. There is a kind of quiet strength required to remain faithful to something unseen. It is not loud or forceful. It is calm, steady, and certain. It does not argue with reality or try to fight it. Instead, it simply holds a different vision and refuses to let go of it. This is the kind of faith that transforms lives. Not blind belief, but a deep inner knowing that what you have chosen to assume will eventually express itself, and that knowing becomes stronger each time you choose it over doubt. You will notice that your mind may try to pull you back into old patterns. It will bring up fears, remind you of past failures, and point out everything that hasn't changed yet. This is natural. Your mind is used to familiar patterns, and anything new feels uncertain at first. But you don't have to fight these thoughts. You just have to not identify with them. Let them pass without giving them power. Return your focus to the state you have chosen. The more you do this, the weaker the old patterns become. Another important part of staying faithful is managing your emotional reactions. When something unexpected happens, an expense, a delay, a setback, it's easy to fall back into fear or frustration. But those reactions only reinforce the idea that things are not working out. Instead, try to respond differently. Even if it feels unnatural at first, remind yourself that this is temporary, that everything is still unfolding in your favor. This doesn't mean you ignore action or responsibility. It means you approach them from a place of calm rather than panic. Consistency is what makes this work. It's not about being perfect or never having a negative thought. It's about returning to your chosen belief again and again, no matter how many times you get distracted. Each time you come back to it, you strengthen it. And over time, it becomes your new default state. What once felt like effort begins to feel natural. What once required conscious focus becomes automatic. And when that happens, your external reality starts to shift more noticeably. You may not always see immediate changes, but subtle signs will begin to appear. Small opportunities, new ideas, unexpected solutions. These are all indications that something is moving. But if you are too focused on what hasn't happened yet, you may miss them. Staying faithful also means being open to how things unfold, not just when. It means trusting that the process is working, even if it doesn't look exactly the way you imagined. There is also a sense of freedom that comes with this approach. When you stop relying on external validation, you are no longer at the mercy of circumstances. You begin to feel more in control, not because you are forcing outcomes, but because you are grounded in your inner state. That stability allows you to move through life with more ease, more clarity, and more confidence. And ironically, it is often when you stop needing things to happen that they begin to happen. So staying faithful is not about ignoring reality completely. It is about choosing which reality you give your attention and energy to. The visible one that reflects your past, or the invisible one that holds your future. And every moment you are making that choice whether you realize it or not. Choose the one that aligns with where you want to go, not where you have been. Because the more you invest in that inner vision, the more it begins to take shape in your outer world.